U.S. Bank is a wing of U.S. Bancorp, which is a really large financial institution headquartered in Minneapolis. They are suddenly becoming a crypto player worth watching. Today, we reported that they are launching a cryptocurrency custody product. They're also working with NYDIG on its proposed Bitcoin ETF. This comes just days after they announced an investment in a cryptocurrency infrastructure firm called Securrency. So, U.S. Bank, to me, this story is about this whole institutional Bitcoin thing going from Manhattan to Minneapolis. And we're seeing banks jump on this wagon hard right now. Again, with the custody, which I think is an interesting gateway for institutional clients. Hey, we'll hold the Bitcoin for you and potentially offer services from there. So the fact that this firm is entering the space in a much more concerted way is something that Ian Allison, my colleague, has been reporting on this week. And I thought it was quite interesting to see, not Goldman, not Morgan Stanley, not JP Morgan. We've seen a lot of those headlines, but Midwestern mainstream U.S. Bank doing this in a meaningful capacity. I'm going to throw this to Will. What does this portend for, the institutional embrace of Bitcoin beyond just the Wall Street Titans?
Yeah, great question. So I think in a larger sense, we're seeing the kind of return to the wildcat banking era of the 1800s, where you just have like institutions playing against startup banks. And that hasn't been seen in quite literally decades, where we have these new players moving into the ecosystem. And it's all because of the promise of digital assets. So Coinbase itself is a quasi-bank. And right now it doesn't have a lot of the banking charters that other banks have as institutions. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them get those charters going forward, in the same sense that I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of these custodians do similar things, or they'll just be bought up by existing banks to be a part of the infrastructure for what is the future of money. And so I think it's very interesting. It's great for the consumer to be right here in the present. I think 5-10 years from now, we're going to have a completely different banking landscape than what we've had for essentially like the last 30 years or so, because we have new players moving in and they're pushing incumbents out. Incumbents are pushing back and trying to hop on the bandwagon and figure out what the heck is Bitcoin and why do people want it and how do we custody it, how do we use it, how do we earn yield on these assets. So it's a great time to be a customer. I'll get back to you, Zach.
Yeah, I think it was mentioned in one of the pieces that this OCC decision to allow banks to custody crypto in some capacity was a real game changer here. So it's interesting to see these established institutions sort of playing catch up with the crypto natives. Again, this is in partnership with a sub-custodian that was not yet named. So this is similar in some respects to maybe BNY Mellon working with Fireblocks to help its wealth management clients access and store Bitcoin with their trusted financial institution. So there is also opportunity here for the crypto native custody firms to partner with some of these major financial brands and get this out the door to more and more clients. I'll toss this to Naomi, actually. Do you think, what do you think? Is U.S. Bank one to watch? Are we going to see other sort of mid-majors jump into this space and offer services along these lines?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see what they're actually going to do. So the US Bank strategy chief, Christine Waldron, said that in terms of what flavors of crypto US Bank will be servicing, she said it can't just be a Bitcoin storyline. So I'm interested to see what that means. Are they just diversifying in terms of cryptocurrencies? Are they going to maybe start to look into offering certain securities or tokenized stocks like Binance has? Are they going to be getting adventurous? I'd be very interested to see, now that banks are starting to get involved with the staples, what happens from there? Are they going to start to get more adventurous and broaden their horizons? I don't know, Zach, if you have any thoughts on whether that's way too soon and that's 5 years, 10 years down the line, or whether that may be something we start to see.
I think that's a great point and a great question. It would be fascinating to see if your local bank provided you access to DeFi lending platforms where you could earn far more yield on your assets than you would in their own savings account. So I think that's still quite distant as people figure out, again, sort of the plain vanilla offering here. But as we've seen time and again, crypto custody is really that first step. And then what comes next is potentially interesting and still very much an open question. I'll throw this to Jen. What are your thoughts on what this sort of signals to the broader market?
I wanted to say to Will first that I love that you take us on a history lesson, at least like twice a week. We get to go back in history with Will and look at what's happened and what's going to happen. I think this is a great step forward. I mean, thinking about the future, listening to what Naomi's just said, and Zach, what you've just said, I think it's a great step forward. It's great for kind of mainstream adoption. I don't have really anything super intelligent to add past that, but it's a nice, good news story. Ben, what do you got?
No, I thought it was just kind of interesting about this being sort of a mid-major bank in like a region that we might not think about as being particularly interesting in crypto or like the future of finances. And I think that, if they're doing this, it does speak, as we've mentioned time and time again, to some form of customer demand. And I think, in some ways, like Denver, for example, has been pitching itself as like a new Silicon Valley kind of thing. We're seeing a lot more tech start to congregate to the Midwest in some ways. I think this is an interesting data point just for thinking about this, because I think that while we think of Bitcoin and whatnot as like international and not, sort of regionally bound or anything, what regions are adopting it is going to be really important and speaks to the demographics that might be demanding it.
For sure. Another data point in the evolution to Bitcoin, not blockchain, from the big banks. Quite interesting to see.